Hello, everybody. Welcome to Cool Cat Teacher Talk, Episode 6, talking about how to help kids who have gone through trauma. This is Cool Cat Teacher Talk, where we talk about what matters in the classroom.
Ever wondered how remarkable teaching happens? Find out right now at Cool Cat Teacher Talk with award-winning teacher Vicki Davis. Get insights from top educators, tech tips, and inspiration to elevate your teaching.
In the last episode of Cool Cat Teacher Talk, we talked about teacher self-care. I have interviews with child psychologists about their research to help children specifically after the trauma of a storm. Daniel Simmons, a pastor here in Albany, Georgia, and said, "We won't be able to make this place a better place until we realize that our neighbor's house is our house." Pointed his finger, he said, "It's our house." Due to displacement, that there will be children from the storms who may never go home. Some of them will find new homes and some of them will just have to find a new normal. These children will end up in all of our schools. They are our children, and this is our house. So the purpose of today's show is to help us know how to help children in the aftermath of the storm based on the research that has been conducted in prior tragic situations. This is not only about helping the children, but also answers questions like, when should we go back to school? And how can we create a new normal, even if we're in a difficult situation? This show is taking a definite leadership approach. But remember, all of us are leaders. Principals, superintendents, parents, teachers, policymakers, and students. We are all leaders needed in this time. The best sermon series I've ever heard on leadership is called Not on My Watch by my dear beloved late pastor, Michael Catt. There was a sermon that he preached about the loneliness of leadership in 2013. And his widow, Terry Catt, a dear friend, has given permission for me to share this short clip to help us understand some of the aspects of leadership we all need to have, but also can make it lonely to lead. This is an excerpt from Not on My Watch by Michael Catt.
I mean, being a leader takes a toll on you. I mean, we know that. I mean, look at anybody that's been president for 8 years. They age 20 while they're in office. It has physical consequences. It has emotional consequences. It has spiritual consequences. Now let's talk about loneliness and the painful part. Here's what's painful about it. When you see something before others see it. The leader has to see before others. When you see something before others see it and they don't get it, or they don't grasp it, or they resist it, whatever it might be. Secondly, when you sense something before others sense it, you just know there's a change coming. You know there's a decision that has to be made. You know something's wrong. Something doesn't smell right. Something doesn't feel right. When you sense something before others sense it. When you do something before others are willing to do it. We were kind of on the forefront of making Christian movies, and now everybody does it. Can I tell you, we weren't the cool kid on the block when we started. People thought we were crazy. And when you do something before others are willing to do it, it's easy to do it once somebody else has done it. I mean, it took a long time for somebody to run a 4-minute mile. But once somebody did it, then everybody knew it could be done. It just takes a while. It took Lindbergh getting in an airplane to fly across the ocean nonstop and land in Paris. Somebody had to do it. Probably a lot of people sat around and said, "Oh yeah, I think that could be done, right circumstances." But he had to get in an airplane by himself and do it. When you do something before other people are willing to do it, when you count on someone and they don't come through, that may be the toughest part of leadership.
Pastor Michael's point was so important. Leadership is lonely, and often people can call you crazy when you have a vision. But when we look as leaders at what is coming, one thing that is coming is not only perhaps more storms, but more wounded and hurting children. But we also need to remember that we all have children in our classrooms experiencing the trauma of loss, fear, tragic circumstances, and so many other things. And so I believe you will find things in this show to help you as you work with them. This first excerpt is an interview I did with Stephen Berkowitz in September 2017 from a show titled How to Help Children Recover from the Trauma of a Storm. This was recorded after Hurricane Harvey that impacted so many of my friends in Texas. But it applies to what we're experiencing now. His goal was to help us understand how to help children in the aftermath of a bad weather event. This is Stephen Berkowitz, How to Help Children Recover from the Trauma of a Storm, from the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast, September 6, 2017. Today we're talking with Dr. Stephen Berkowitz. He is the director of the Penn Center for Youth and Family Trauma Response and Recovery, and someone that I've turned to quite a few times in my podcasting career when we need to talk to kids about trauma. And today we want to talk about helping kids cope with the trauma of a storm. Where do we even start with this sort of trauma?
It's hard to know, isn't it? I think the first thing that we have to, recognize is that it's really safety and security that comes first. And nobody is going to be able to feel secure until they're in a situation where there's some sense that there's going to be a routine, a regularity, and they know what the future holds, which, of course, is really, really hard in this situation.
And some people say, let's just let them recover and then school will just start whenever. But aren't there some cases of when you do want to try to get them back on a routine and do want to get them back in school?
Absolutely. And it's really important that kids are back in school and parents are back at work. The dilemma, of course, is how to do that. And in this case, the devastation is so profound. And, how long it's going to take to actually recover is anyone's guess. And so the question really is how do we actually energize and help people who have been displaced and may be displaced for a while get into situations, get into communities that can be supportive so they can return to, maybe displaced, but somewhat regular situations and lives. I mean, we learned a lot from Katrina. And one of the things that I think we really learned is that having people sit around, not do anything in, camps or something like that is really devastating for their well-being. And so the crucial thing is to get people back to work and kids back to school. And whether that's working on the recovery with a hammer and nail or going to school, somewhere in trailers that are convenient and safe, absolutely crucial.
It's just so hard. And isn't there a case for a new normal? Because one thing I found with the floods in 94 that we had here in South Georgia was that, you get rescued, you get out of the home that's flooded, but somehow children expect that they're going to be able to go back and everything is going to be just like it was. And when it isn't, they have a hard time coping.
Well, I think that's not only true of kids. I think that's true of everybody. I think younger kids, of course, don't have the cognitive capacity to understand the reality. And there is absolutely a new normal. It's really, really crucial that in whatever developmental phase your child is in, if you're really subjected to this devastation, is to help explain what's going on and what the reality is and what the future holds to best of your knowledge. Nothing will be the same for these people. As you know, in these situations, the people who are most likely to be impacted in a negative way are those that don't have the resources. So if you have family in in Atlanta and you can fly to Atlanta and be supported by your family, that makes a big difference. If all your family's in Houston, you have nowhere to go.
Yeah. So what kinds of things do you say to your children? You said, try to get them back into a routine as soon as you can. Talk to them about the new normal and the new reality. What other kinds of things do parents and teachers need to talk to kids about?
To be very honest about how everybody's feeling, that what they're concerned about, not with, tears and upset, but, I'm worried too. I don't know what's going to happen next. Our job is going to be to take care of you, and we will do the best we can. And the whole country is here to help you. And that's what we're going to work on. But we're going to have to do this all together. I think that as I mentioned before, that one of the most important things for any kid and any adult is to get active, is not just sit around and wait for things to happen.
Yeah. So besides being inactive and not getting back to work and getting yourself busy, are there any other big mistakes that parents and caregivers make with children in trauma?
Well, one of the things that we all want to do is to say it's going to be okay and to act as if it's going to be okay. And when that's just not true, it's not good for anybody and it's not good for kids. So it's really important to be as authentic as possible with them. Again, they don't have to know every detail. You need to be supportive, but it's important to let them know what is going on and what the concerns are. And also, to be very clear that this is a major, major deal. It's not a game. It's real, and you need to be able to be part of our plan to support each other and to move ahead. The idea that they're not involved somehow, you don't have to worry about anything. That's just not fair, and it's not accurate. So they're not, not everything is not going to be okay, and that's fine to say it's going to be different. And yes, we need you actively involved with us to move forward as a family.
How about dealing with the fear? I mean, one of the struggles is that, as you know, many families kind of have a stigma with seeing a psychologist, and they really need to. I mean, this is trauma. If somebody has a broken arm, they go to the doctor. But if someone has a broken heart or a broken mind, many times people don't get help, and the children are the ones who suffer. So how do we get help for their fears and for the fears of the adults?
Well, I think, again, we have learned a great deal since Katrina, Sandy. Hopefully, with the federal government support, we have very good programs and models in place now where with crisis counseling, there's several very well done guides and books and trainings that have been done. And so the key piece is really through outreach in these situations, going to where people are, supporting them, helping them recognize what their reactions are, and engaging them in that particular situation. A lot of this can be done in outreach with people who are well supervised but don't necessarily have the degrees, and most people will still recover. The key piece in these situations in the crisis counseling program is really to identify those people that are really struggling and help get the help they need. So I think it really is about outreach. You can imagine when you're devastated, you lost your home, you may have lost family or friends or not know where they are. The last thing on your mind is thinking about getting therapy.
Yeah.
So that's why, the kind of outreach, the, group support, that is a way to engage families and kids. There are shelters that do that routinely, and hopefully once things get a little bit more stable, that kind of approach can take place. These shelters are going to be in operation for a long time.
So what's your message to schools?
This is, it's a really important and complicated question. So what happens when you get students that, are coming from the Houston area into your school in, I don't know, Louisiana or Oklahoma? It is really a complex environment. You have devastated kids and families. And so schools, as often is the case, now have to take on multiple important roles. And one of the most important roles is not thinking that education and learning is the primary practice. It really is about integrating and supporting these new kids into this new culture and climate of a new school and new community. For those temporary schools, it's going to be a similar kind of thing, because these are probably a large group of people who have never had any experience with one another. It's rebuilding from the get-go. And so really, supporting just normal functioning and development. I'm not saying, don't teach. I'm just saying that's not the primary function at this point.
And getting them back is just such an important, we need to be having these conversations. Don't some people just deal with this sort of thing by, let's just pretend like everything's normal?
Well, look, that's what we hope, right? We hope that if we just keep going and put our heads down, everything will go away. All the problems will disappear. Get ye behind thee, Satan, right? Again, that's very common and very understandable. And by the way, if you can do it, go for it. It's great if you can make that work. It's very hard. And particularly in this situation or situations like this, the trauma is not the storm, it's not the moment. It's going to be ongoing for months for many people, if not longer, as the losses pile up. And so there's also this kind of just effect of your ability to deal eroding with all the challenges that come up.
Yeah, because sometimes, if it's one thing, okay, it's one thing. If it's two things, it's two things. Some people lose their temper getting stuck in traffic, but this isn't traffic. This is your home and your insurance, and your health may have problems, or your school, or is my job. It's every single thing in their whole life. And that is really hard for most people to comprehend. My Facebook feed is full of some people who've lost everything and other people who are whining because somebody took their coffee at Starbucks.
Right.
And it's just a totally different level of problem.
Absolutely. We can't judge people at all for their concerns. And, context is really important. But if you think about your normal everyday stresses that get to you, this is beyond most of our imaginations. Right now, in an odd way, while it's really in the midst of the crisis, it's almost easier to manage. Mm-hmm. It's when, I think the analogy that I often use is when a family member passes, there's so much support, and you're busy, and you almost don't have time to think about your feelings. It's really about a week or 2 weeks later where it really hits. And this is the kind of thing that once, the floodwaters recede, it's going to really hit.
Yeah.
And it's really just crucial. It's the connectedness in the community that's going to help kids in particular ride this out.
Stephen, you've given us so much to think about. Could you leave us on an up note? Could you tell us, is there hope? Do you see people working through these and coming out stronger?
Absolutely. I think the hope is really what we have seen are the amazing number of people that have responded in whatever way they can, whether it's physically or with money or food, and that is where the hope is. The hope is in coming together and supporting and helping people who have been impacted so strongly. And that just makes us better, and that makes everybody better. In one way to think about it is this is a huge crisis, but there's so much opportunity to come together and be together in these crisis situations.
Now we're going to talk to Brianna Hertz. about when students should return to school after a natural disaster, studied what happened after Hurricane Maria to determine the best response for students. I hope we can all learn from the past so we don't make mistakes in the future. This is Education Renaissance, Research on Returning to School After Natural Disasters, episode 701 of the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast.
Brianna, your research is global practices in returning to formal schooling after interruptions in education due to natural disasters. Oh my goodness, do we have the natural disasters? We've got a pandemic, we've got fires, we've got hurricanes and flooding. So what does the research tell us about our kids going back to school no matter what they've experienced?
Well, thank you for having me on here, Vicki. And we definitely have a lot going on right now. My research had focused primarily originally with a goal of when I was teaching in Florida, about looking at students that had been displaced to Florida schools after having the effects of Hurricane Maria, which hit Puerto Rico, and looking how to integrate those students into the Florida classrooms, whether it be in a temporary basis or on a permanent basis. And what I ended up finding with the research was just an interesting international response from so many different nations that have faced this and have really used natural disasters and interruptions in schooling as a way to incite almost a renaissance in their educational systems and try things that hadn't been tried before. I'll give you an example. Looking at the island nation of Vanuatu, after they had a complete devastation due to a cyclone, they actually went in their educational system and incorporated multilingual education for the first time because they were looking for something new and a way to revamp and revisit and to bring back. When we're looking at responses in Liberia and Sierra Leone through Ebola, we saw students that were coming back after really not leaving the classroom in the traditional sense, sure, but in a non-traditional sense, they were putting lessons over national public radio for students to follow along and keep up with reading. Every nation does something a little bit different, but what is the main thread when looking at the response and the return to schooling is making sure those students have a sense of belonging and that they still feel that they are a part of a community. Every student's experience in a natural disaster is going to be different. But the commonality is that they've all been through it together. So now what we can do is come up with ways as educators to make our classroom environment inviting, but also consider the renaissance that's happening. This is a chance for us as educators to make those kinds of decisions about whether we really want to digitize what we've been doing, which has worked with partial successes for sure. But as you talk to educators too, what we keep hearing is we want to do something different. Well, what a time to be able to try something different and to try to make us a little less exhausted too.
Try something different. And I love looking at the positive side and saying, let's have an educational renaissance. But let's back up to one super important thing that you have. You've got some educators who are teaching online, some are teaching face-to-face. Now, which way are you teaching right now?
Right now, I am fully online synchronous. So my days are spent on Zoom.
Yep, and mine have been face-to-face mostly, but a little bit of Zoom also. Now, how do you build community in Zoom so that students feel like they belong?
You know, it was interesting that you asked this, Vicki, because at the start, I was feeling exhausted, as are so many of us educators right now, trying to think about, well, how can I get everything that I've done and all the good stuff, the lessons that I love the most, how can I make them work in this environment? And the reality is they can't all work in this environment. I've got to think about something different. I have a box in my basement that says Barbies and slingshots that's going to stay there for a while. My statistics educator folks will definitely know what that's all about. But what I started doing was thinking about the problems that we've had, especially in mathematics education, which is my area of teaching. And we always are talking about how students are not making connections to what they've done in the past and carrying them through with their education. So I got a little inspired with some of my students because in talking to them and trying to get them to come off mute or wondering why they were trying to mute their background, so many of them had younger brothers and sisters in the background that they were also doing their online learning. And then I started having students staying after class and saying, hey, my brother's in sixth grade, seventh grade, and they're doing something I forgot. Can you help me with them really quick? So what I did was I took that and I turned it into a classroom culture where the students could interact with each other and each other's families. Instead of trying to isolate, why not embrace the fact that everybody is home in a different situation and everyone's trying to do online learning together? So every one of my classes right now has a family help corner where students can pose questions from their cousins, siblings, loved ones, parents who are in college, and other students can respond to that on video, and they get a little extra bonus if they make a connection to something we're doing right now. That's something we couldn't have done before the pandemic, nor would have thought of doing before the pandemic. So instead of looking at how can I make my classroom look like it used to, I wanted to start thinking about how can I make my classroom look like it never could before?
How can I make my classroom look like it never could before? Do you have any other ways? Because here's the thing is, you and I have been talking, you talked about Hurricane Maria, you've talked about islands, you talked about Liberia, Sierra Leone, and now you're relating it to what we're experiencing. And that's really what they did. They said, what can we do that we've never done before? Are there any other things besides the Family Help Corner? Because that's awesome.
Yes, there's a lot that I've been trying to do. One thing I found was that students are having a device, and I can rely on every single one of them to have that device. So I'm having students create collaborative video lessons for each other because every one of them has access to that technology and to the platforms that we have. And then they're able to post the video lessons to each other and also connect. They're learning what they can actually do in a room together and how they can all talk and how they can present, how they can actually write on each other's whiteboards while being apart. So trying to come up with ways where they're still connecting and doing things that we couldn't do before. And before, when you could not rely on students to all have a device or have students to all have a certain level of access, those things were limited. But now we have at least a bit of an even playing field with technology. So instead of trying to spend my time digitizing worksheets, why not use technology as a teaching tool in a new way?
I love that. And, though the challenge is a lot of students have technology they've never had before. And that's the good thing. And it's also the challenge because they don't know how to behave on it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think with that too, you have to keep your humor as a teacher, but also reminding students just of the little things and the little moments. But also, we are in students' lives in a way that we have never been before. So because of that, we are literally having a window into their homes, which, like you said, is both a blessing and a curse at times. So learning how to behave in a classroom or to behave on technology is something new that we are all learning. So I wouldn't even say that that's just a problem for telling students how to behave. I think we are all learning as a class how to interact with each other in a way that is respectful, but also is compassionate to the fact that you don't know what's going on outside of that student's box. How many other people are in the household at that moment, all trying to do their learning? How many people are on the Wi-Fi because that student has the strong Wi-Fi, or did they have to go to another home or a parking lot? Compassion is definitely key. But as long as the students are responding and interacting with each other, I think a little bit of grace goes a long way.
So, Brianna, I'm so curious. I can't help it. I can't end the show without asking you this. So you've shared just some of the research about that they have a sense of belonging and that we need to consider what's the renaissance we can have in education because of this. That do you have anything else from the research you've done that you're like, oh my goodness, we need to apply this now?
One thing that I did with my students who had come in from Hurricane Maria from Puerto Rico was pair them with one-on-one student mentors who spoke the same language because that was one of the barriers they faced. And I had a lot of success with it. A way that we can translate this to the environment we have now is many people are dealing with situations where they have students who are in person sometimes and students who are online who are all members of the same class. That is a situation that many schools and many teachers are facing right now. It seems like you're teaching two classes at once. So why not set up a mentoring pairing system so a student from an in-person class can be paired with an online student and they can share those experiences and realize that we are still one big class. That idea of mentorship can go a long way, and it can help us in these platforms where often as teachers right now being put in some interesting dual environments.
So, Brianna, I totally 100% agree that a best practice for the high flex or hybrid system is what we call a class captain. That's what we call it at our school. When we had some high flex situations occur, we actually found that having at least two kids in the class, usually they're stronger students. They watch the back channel, they pose questions, they advocate for those students that are at home. Sometimes they answer questions. And then if you automatically save that chat, the teacher can take a look at it when class is over. And I don't know how teachers can make it if they don't have a paraprofessional in that back channel. They're going to have students in there and working together and creating that community of trust. And we're all in this together. That is such an excellent best practice. Do you have anything else that you want to pull out before we finish?
One thing, too, there's a lot of new research coming out from Conrad Hughes out in Switzerland, talking about the shift and the possibility of this educational renaissance, if you want to read more in that realm. There's a lot talking about more project-based learning, less about direct tests, because we all are struggling with how will we proctor a traditional test, and moving beyond the education system that we have known it for so long and considering the possibility of having something different.
And just talking to kids.
Talking to kids.
And interact. Well, Dr. Brianna Kurtz, so many great ideas, resources, and did you ever have any idea when you were doing this original research that you would find such an application now?
I did not. I'll have to admit to you, Vicki, that when I was doing my research at first, I got a lot of different colleagues or other professors out there saying, well, this is really interesting, but very niche. And then that quickly changed. And then I became very glad that I had chosen this field so that hopefully we can all take something away from the research that's out there, because although this is our first time that we're looking at this in modern education in the United States, it certainly will not be the last.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time. And educators, we've got some great best practices here. Just remember, help kids feel like they belong. They're part of a community. Consider what can we do that we couldn't do before, and have an excuse to do those things now, as well as adopting some of these best practices that are rapidly coming to the forefront for the situations we're in.
While many people try to measure schools in just test scores don't matter as much as the test of life does. When we experience struggles, pain, hardship, and trauma, this test is ours. Will we be faithful? Will we serve? Will we be strong and fulfill our purpose for which we were created? Will we rise up and lead, and particularly help our children? In 2000, my tiny hometown of Camilla, Georgia, was hit with 3 tornadoes on Valentine's Day. 28 people died and 250 homes were destroyed. We had small children at the time, but my husband was head of Rotary Club and I was president of the Chamber of Commerce. And we knew it was our calling to step up and do something. The volunteer effort was incredible, and we have an amazing small town. But Kip got out there as head of the Mitchell County Command Center and led the boots on the ground. And I worked at the Chamber of Commerce office and wrote a database and website to help manage volunteers and deploy them to the neediest places. After that, we received several awards, including one from NVOAD, the National Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster, and were inducted into Leadership Georgia the year following the storms. That was 2 of the hardest weeks of my life, but I did learn so much and things that I still use to this day when I help others. But I had no idea what it was like to be on the receiving end of the help. As hard as it was to help people in disaster, having a disaster on my own property was harder. Just 7 years ago yesterday, as I record this, My home was impacted by Hurricane Michael. So when this happened, I had no power, but I had a cell phone and I was already recording my podcast. So I recorded an extended episode about the experience in the aftermath of the storm. As I re-listened to this episode, these experiences are so similar to what I'm hearing just up the street from me in Valdosta and in North Carolina and in Florida. And I'll tell you this, if you haven't lived it, trust me, you do not know what it's like. And even then, everybody's experience is different. So I would never say to someone experiencing the current natural disasters that I understand or I know what you're going through. Nobody can truly know another person's pain, but we can use our experience in pain to better minister to others. So I'm going to do that now. I'm going to include a bit of the podcast I recorded when we had no power with Hurricane Michael. This is episode 377 of the 10-Minute Teacher Podcast, recorded on October 15th, 2018, titled, We Were Hit by Hurricane Michael, What You Need to Know About Tech When You Have No Technology.
I am recording this from a disaster area. I don't know, 150, 200 miles wide. We can't really get the news here. But I'm in Camilla, Georgia, and we were on the east side of the storm, and you can hear the background noise of the chainsaws, perhaps. And I was talking with our school chaplain, Jeremy Davidson, about this a while ago. And I said, the thing is, I want kids to know how to use technology. But the one thing that has me very concerned about technology is that kids don't know how to live without it. Literally, they don't know how to live without it. Now, my friend Lisa Logan up in Albany made a comment when I could get on Facebook that kids were playing Red Rover and she thought tag was the next game up. So there are some good things, I guess, that happen when you don't have power, that the kids actually get out and connect and play with each other in new ways. But this is a very serious disaster unfolding, and I don't think it's over quite yet. We're certainly not the worst off. This is a Sunday when I'm recording it, and we have no power. You could ask, how am I recording this? Well, we actually traveled up to Atlanta to get generators for my husband's work, and his brother, Mark, loaned him a generator for our house, which we run 2 times a day. But there are still people a lot worse off than we are. We are hauling water, so we have no power, no water, no internet, and we actually have no cell service. So I'll have to go somewhere where I can find internet to even be able to upload this, and we're just going to do our best. So as we were in the car driving to Atlanta to get the generators, Kip and I made a list of the technologies that we need when we don't have technology. Now, number one on our list is actually our Dynamo hand crank radio. This thing has been indispensable. We were able to get news throughout the whole disaster. And I think that's one of the hardest things is knowing, where is it? And we lost power, we lost cell service, we lost everything. We didn't know where the eye was or anything. And so we were texting our children, and then Kip had on the hand crank radio, and it needed one battery, I think, for the light, but you just crank it up and it just tunes in. And I am so grateful that some of the radio stations banded together down here and broadcast disaster news that night. And I cannot tell you what that means. I know that the local TV stations really tried to do a lot, but they couldn't understand that we couldn't get their app. We couldn't see any of their stuff. And I truly wish the TV stations had broadcast on radio, but they didn't. We have a gas grill that's also a charcoal grill, and it also has a side burner. And we have these cast iron pots, and we have a lid with a Dutch oven. And I'm going to tell you that has helped us so much. When we knew we were going to lose everything in our refrigerator, we scrambled 12.5 eggs in a big cast iron pot on that burner. And then we had Kip's Pioneer percolating coffee pot. And I thought I was going to cry when I had coffee the second day when we found that pot, because we knew we had it somewhere and we'd never used it. We always keep an extra tank of propane. So we don't wait till we're out to buy new. We always keep an extra propane tank. And that was a really smart thing to do. Now, the only problem when you cook with these is that this stuff gets really, really hot. And we have these 2 plastic arm length, I think they're neoprene. I'm not sure what they are, but I got them from Walmart, and they're long plastic gloves that let you take the stuff off of the grill.
Now, I'm telling you all this because not only do you need to get these items, but you need to teach your kids how to deal with these items. Now, the other thing that was really, really helpful are these hot, cold lunch boxes that we have, because I'm truly starting to understand what it's like. I don't know that I could ever understand what it was like to be a pioneer, but the way that we've pretty much run is we cook everything for breakfast and lunch in the morning, and then we put them in these hot, cold lunch boxes if we're going to eat them. And now we're down to sandwiches and bars and stuff. But fortunately, Walmart opened yesterday, and we could at least get bread, even though there's not much in there but water, bread, and that sort of thing. Aluminum foil and aluminum pans are really, really helpful also to have. So you definitely want to have those. Now, the other thing that Kip had gotten a while back were these LED flashlights with a belt clip, and it's just a little hook, and you're going to laugh, but we actually would walk around the house with those hooked onto our belts so we could turn on the flashlight anytime we needed to, and those are very helpful. Now, he also has these 30-day LED light hanging devices that'll run on for 30 days with one D-cell battery, and he's hung those in the kitchen when I was cooking or when I needed it before we had the generator. It was just so very helpful. Having enough chargers is a really big deal. If a storm is coming, you want to have all your chargers going. Now, speaking of chargers, one big thing that you need to understand when you have some sort of disaster like this is it's not the time to get mad at people for not responding to your text, because I'll tell you this, a whole bunch of texts did not come in, and we did not know people were trying to check on us. And we actually had some people get upset because we didn't respond, and we couldn't respond because we weren't getting and sending. We couldn't do anything. It was really just a mess. Now, in this case, I have an iPhone, so you want to teach your kids and everybody you know how to swap from iMessage to SMS. So you go into your settings and you go down to messages and you turn off iMessage. That makes everything go to standard messaging service. Now, if anything will get through, even before phone calls, SMS will get through. So you definitely want to make sure that if you have an iPhone, you know how to switch to SMS. If you have an Android, if it has that feature, you want to know how to do that too. You also want to have adapters for your car. Now, the other thing is you want to fill up your bathtubs and then make sure it seals. And what I would suggest you do with your family is to actually have a dry run of this and say, okay, we're going to pretend like it's a disaster, and we're going to flush our toilets tomorrow like we would if it was a disaster. And you want to have, some 5-gallon buckets or some large buckets, and you fill up your bathtubs. Now, the reason I say make sure it seals is that I did not realize that the bathroom in my master bathroom, that bathtub didn't seal. So we had 2 bathtubs full of water. When we got up the next morning, only one was full and the other had drained out, and I was not a happy camper. But then, of course, what you want to know is to get that bucket, and then you take the back of the toilet off. Now, the new toilets only require 1.5 gallons to flush them. So you pour it in that back end until the little rubber part is floating. And then when it's floating, then you can flush the toilet. What I would suggest that you do, and this is very unpleasant conversation, but you have to have it, is that you pick one family toilet that you're going to use in case of the power going out, and that you flush intermittently through the day. And just take that as you will, but you want to keep it one separate bathroom that everybody's not using all the time to like brush their teeth and that sort of thing. So the old toilets require 3.5 gallons. And so I was really glad that Kip had swapped all of our toilets to the newer 1.5 gallons, especially in the case of this disaster. So you do want your children to know how to flush the toilet in case of having a power outage. From what I have read, I've read Terry Blackstock's book, Last Light, and then there's another book called 1 Second After, I believe is the name of the book. And those 2 books talk about what would happen in the case of an EMP or electromagnetic pulse going out, which would cause massive power outages and basically fry all of our electronics and put you in a circumstance where we are, except far worse. And one of the first things that happens is people don't know how to flush their toilets. And so they have sewage overruns and illness that happens as a result of it. And really bad things happen. So please make sure your kids know how to flush their toilet in the case of an emergency. And this is the technology that really, really counts in the end. Now, you also want to make sure that you do have a chainsaw that runs, particularly if you have trees around, and 2-cycle oil and work gloves. So we actually stocked up on all of this during Irma. Hurricane Irma did not really happen as bad as it was supposed to here, but it ended up being a great blessing because we had some tarps we could give our neighbors. We had stocked up on a lot of things that we still had, and we were able to help a lot of people because we had stocked up for Irma. And we're going to go back to the store and get tarps and more chainsaw 2-cycle oil and all that sort of thing. Now, you do need extra water, or 3 liters of water per day per person. And we've gotten to where we keep extra water at the house, and we're going to be even more vigilant about that as well. Now, every one of our sinks, we not only have a dishwasher detergent, but we also have hand sanitizer. And there is a time when you have to just use that because you can boil water if you're able. But even if you are able, there's just not enough water to make sure that you're sanitary. And that's just something you need. Of course, you need a lot of batteries. Kip keeps that, and a lot of paper towels and bleach and vinegar. And these are the things for those of you who will make sure that you keep your kitchen clean. I have been extra vigilant. You do not want to have any dishes at all, especially if you don't have power, that are not cleaned. Because if you have your doors open, you could attract flies, and then you're just going to end up with a very unsanitary circumstance there. So our house is real clean and sanitary in that way right now, which is great. Now, this sounds silly, but 4-way stops, if you can really drill in the head of kids how to handle 4-way stops, and I sure wish that somebody would create some kind of VR simulator so people could practice 4-way stops, because that has been the most dangerous thing about this disaster has actually been the people that do not know how to do a 4-way stop. It is unbelievable, and it is very stressful to drive and go to try to get supplies when people don't know how to handle a 4-way stop at major intersections. And when I say major, I'm talking like interstates and just these huge intersections that really can turn into a disaster very quickly. Now, we have one piece of technology that failed on us, but we bought it a long time ago. We're going to buy another one, a solar charger for the iPhone. It would be great if it worked, but our old Solio did not work, and it was admittedly a lot older. And I've heard that the technology is a lot better now. So we're going to get solar chargers for all of our devices. Do remember that if you are listening to any kind of storm coverage or news on your iPhone, that external speakers take a lot of battery. You're really better off, if you're in those circumstances, to listen on your earbuds and let somebody else listen on the earbuds, or plug it into one of those external speakers, and it'll run off of the speaker of the external battery, and it won't take so much battery out of your iPhone. Of course, I will say that I have been pretty disgusted because I think it's been about 6 or 9 months ago, maybe a year, there was an iOS update that literally cut my battery life in half. And not having battery is really a life or death issue. And so much of my time has been spent dealing with chargers and having, charging all of the chargers and then charging my phone. If I have to constantly use my phone throughout the day, it takes me 2 chargers a day plus the battery on my phone, which is really very, very dangerous. So I hope these tech companies will understand when they cut battery life, it can be life or death. Now, on your phone, one thing that really can help your battery life is to turn off data and only use what you need. So when I'm not using my phone, I put it in airplane mode, and then I go into cellular data and only turn on what I need, and then I turn off background refresh, turn off Wi-Fi, turn off Bluetooth. If you don't have Wi-Fi and you don't have anything Bluetooth, it's just going to suck your battery as well. I think that, and there's so much other things I could tell you about this, but I think that one thing that's important is our pastor had mentioned something about Nehemiah, and he rebuilt the wall in the Old Testament, and he had asked the king if he could get help. And what our pastor said was that if you don't ask, the answer is always no. That is just so very true. Pastor Michael Catt is right about that if you don't ask, the answer is always no. And so, for example, we were clearing our driveway and we couldn't get out of our driveway, and some DOT people were there, and they were trying to clear the road, and our driveway actually would give a way for all of our neighbors to get out too, because they couldn't get out. So there were about 18 people behind us that could get out through our driveway if we could open our driveway. And so they weren't really in the business of clearing driveways. And we said, well, these big logs, and they're too big for all of us. And could you help us clear this driveway so that people can get out? And they kind of looked at us and they said, yeah, we'll clear this driveway and help you get out. Because there was a big phone cable. It looked like a power cable. They actually called somebody over and they said, okay, what is this cable? And they said, okay, it's a phone cable. You're okay. And so because we asked, we were able to get out. If we hadn't been able to get out, we couldn't have gotten the generator. We couldn't have gotten water. I mean, there's so many things we could not have gotten if we didn't just ask. So I really hope that this sort of thing never happens to any of you guys out there. I've never seen anything like this in my entire life. And it's not just my own personal situation. It's the situation of all of my neighbors, the devastation of losing whole cotton crops and pecan groves that will be impacted for years, and homes destroyed. And I've never seen anything like this. Some people on this one are saying, well, why aren't more people coming to help? Well, that's because everybody needs help. So, and if people come in, you have to bring your own food and your own water. You can't count on the fact that there's a restaurant. It's going to be there. It's getting a little bit better, but even getting gas is a challenge. So, if you come in, bring all of these things, and we're pulling together. In our family, we serve an awesome God. He's all the power we need, even when we don't have power, electricity power. He's helped us through, but please don't let it be reality TV for you. I was out in the yard working and people were driving by filming me working because my yard is a complete and utter disaster and it looks terrible. I'm concerned sometimes that we've become a drive-by society, a society that just drives by and doesn't stop and help. So I hope that you'll be a stop and help kind of person, and we just need to be helpful and know that sometimes just showing up and showing them that we care means more than anything. Now let's talk to Joe Mazza about how parents and teachers can teach empathy and empowerment in the aftermath of tragedy. This is an excerpt from episode 196 of the 10-Minute Teacher podcast.
I think Mr. Rogers' words still ring true today, even though I'm in my 40s and I heard him speak when I was, my son's age. Look for the helpers, identify where the help's coming from, how people are becoming heroes, not because of, the fame and being recognized, but, everyday common people can step up. And it doesn't mean you have to have disposable income to contribute here. So just writing a letter, just sending, I know that we've got tons of diapers left from when our babies were infants. So I know diapers is a big need down there. So we're boxing those up. I think there's also opportunities to, say, hey, if your kid is like super high tech and they're really interested in, let's say, for example, drones, there's a huge drone usage down in Houston, so they can identify where people might be stranded. So I think we're using lots of different technologies. I think Zello has been an app, and Zello is a lot like Boxer, where it's a walkie-talkie, and a lot of the people that have been looking for folks have been using that. But I think there's a lot of low-hanging fruit for us to have conversations with kids and really center in empathy, innovation, and empowerment. And we really want to be empowering them to do something about it, whether that's by themselves or with a friend or neighbor next door, with their class, with their school. I think I just saw a master list of principals connecting with other principals in and around the Houston area to the rest of the country. So get out there, adopt a school in that area for the year, make this more than just a one-shot deal. How do you really invest in empathizing with a particular school group of kids down south, be with them, write them letters, help them recover from this as a team?
I know there are so many of you listening to this facing impossible circumstances today. And I can tell you from experience that whatever it is, there is a God who is bigger than the circumstances in this messed up world, that we humans have just messed up horribly. Now, I know a lot of people blame God. Blaming God for a messed up world is like going into your mom's refrigerator and throwing the food all over the kitchen. And then when she comes in the room, you yell at her for the food being thrown everywhere. She made the food, but you made the mess. We have choices, and many of the choices we make are not good choices. So yes, this show talks about what is important in the classroom. But to be completely transparent with you, last night I found out some not so great news about the health of my dad. So when this show airs on radio, television, and YouTube, He will have had surgery to remove the cancer, we hope. But I can tell you this, my pastor's wife, Bria, texted me Isaiah 26, 3-4. You will keep him in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on you because he trusts in you. Trust in the Lord forever, for in the Lord is everlasting strength. Now, I've always worked to love people around the world who are different from me and have different faiths and walks of life. I do know that in all of this, I have a purpose, and part of my purpose is to interview the best people in education in the world and to bring them to real, everyday educators, parents, and policymakers who love kids and want to make the world a better place. Leadership is lonely, but I'm willing to pay the price of loneliness. I am not willing to pay the price of regret. So my encouragement for you is to get out there and reach and help the hurting people. And when it's you that is hurting, let other people reach you and do not isolate yourself. Accept the help. And if the help doesn't come, then get up, pray about it, and figure out what the next step is and do it. My mom always said, if you have a pity party, nobody's going to come to the party but you. No point in having it. But let me tell you what doesn't work. Mindlessly swiping TikTok or Facebook. Whining doesn't help. Pity parties don't help. We need people more than ever. This is something AI can't fix for us, y'all. But when we put off doing the next thing, often we miss our opportunity. People need to love each other and be kind and get up and get busy. And whatever the storms our kids and the world is going through, let's be the ones who help. Even a small thing is a big thing to one person. This is our world. This is our house. These are our kids, and this is our time. This is our date with destiny. This is our watch. Open your eyes and see what needs to be done where you are and get busy. There is so much to be done. So I can't end the show focusing on trauma. I have to end the show talking about hope. There is hope. There is a future. My classroom is named Masterpiece Theater after Ephesians 2:10. That we are a masterpiece created before time began for good works. And so my prayer is that we will realize we are made for such a time as this, and that those of you who accidentally or purposefully came across this show will finish the show. If you have faith, then you'll get on your knees, you'll ask God what to do, but that you will look around and you will see the people who need to be served. Sometimes that person is you, but this is our time and our watch, and it's our time to lead. So get out there and do that.
Stay in the loop. Visit coolcatteacher.com for the latest tips and trends. See you later, educators.
Lord, I pray that you will bless everybody listening to this show today, that you will minister to them in the storm, and they will understand that they can have perfect peace in Jesus Christ. Amen. If you want to be featured on a future show or know an amazing educator I should interview, call and leave a voicemail at 783-2241. You've been listening to Cool Cat Teacher Talk, Episode 6, as we talk about helping kids after the trauma of a storm. You'll find today's show notes and resources at coolcatteacher.com/talkstorm.